Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Gloria Negrete-McLeod, a member of the United States Congress. Congratulations again on a tremendous victory. How's it been? You've been there for a few months now. How's it been?
1 month.
1 month? Okay, how's it been?
Yeah, exciting, busy, very busy, and very busy here in the district office.
Of course. I want to speak with you about an issue that continues to capture the nation, sadden the nation, and that's the issue of gun violence. We recently heard that a young woman from, I believe, the Chicago area who participated in the inauguration was shot down and died after she came back from the inauguration. So the stories keep trickling out. And I want to get a sense from you, Congresswoman, what are you hearing on Capitol Hill? There's a lot of discussion about new restrictions, but are we going to see a bill in your mind that will actually succeed?
I'm not sure. I'm sure that my side of the aisle will work towards it. I don't know if the other side will. However, I think polls out there show that the people seem to be ready for some kind of restriction, especially on assault weapons. I think the polls show that people don't see the necessity for assault weapons.
It's interesting because I have seen those same polls, and they do suggest that most Americans, at least a plurality, would support the reauthorization of the assault weapons ban passed in 1994 and expired in 2004. But as you know, Senator Dianne Feinstein has said that she thinks it's an uphill battle to get that assault weapons ban reauthorized.
Well, maybe we work on something else then. Maybe there'll be something else that will come down the pike that'll fit that what she kind of wants to do. We'll see here. I know California has passed its laws. And
no doubt.
And the people seem to be okay with it.
It is interesting because when you look at those maps and they'll show states with the most restrictive gun laws and states with the least restrictive gun laws, California is always at the most restrictive. And until New York passed its recent set of laws, it was the most restrictive. Now I think it's fair that California and New York, it's fair to say that those two are the most restrictive. But I think about your district, and you know, you're not representing urban Los Angeles. I have to think that you have some very significant supporters of the Second Amendment in your district and supporters of the National Rifle Association. So I'm sure calls are coming in, emails are coming into your office. What is your San Bernardino County district saying to you?
The district is not saying too much right at this minute.
Okay.
However, I think, again, people would see some common sense laws that have worked in California should work across the state. I think most people will agree that you do. If your hypothesis is that you need rifles to shoot, I don't think you need an assault weapon. If you're a sporting man, why would you need an assault weapon to shoot?
I have to ask you, though, about you and your specific race as it relates to gun rights and gun violence. We know that the mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, was a big supporter of yours. Unknown to you, I may say, it was an independent expenditure. And many would argue part of the reason why you were successful taking out an incumbent was because of that support from Mr. Bloomberg. And he supported you exclusively because your predecessor was a pro-gun Democrat. So are you feeling a lot of pressure on this issue as a result of the high-profile nature of your election?
No.
Okay. That's a fair answer. That's an absolute fair answer. Let me shift gears and speak with you about immigration. Another issue that has caused a lot of consternation, a lot of discussion in the Capitol. You represent an area with a significant number of immigrants, both legal and undocumented. Where do you see the immigration debate marching as we go into this 113th Congress?
I think most people will agree that there should be some fairness. Now, I have oftentimes, and I say this quite a bit, that those youngsters that came here either as babies or as very young children that have gone through our schools, that have pledged allegiance every day when they go to school to this country, no other country. So I think people understand that.
Where would you deport them to, especially if they don't speak
They have no other
that
country.
language?
They think this is their country. This is where they've grown. This is where they've gone through school.
Well, it appears that a form of the DREAM Act has gone into law as a result of executive action by the Obama administration. But what we're seeing now, though, is bona fide attempts to legalize those individuals that may be here in an undocumented fashion. You surely heard about the Gang of Eight coming out of the Senate, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, presenting their version of an immigration bill. What interested me most, though, was this requirement in this Senate bill that a commission certify that the border is secure before these immigrants, these undocumented, can actually begin applying for citizenship. Have you looked into this issue? Do you have a sense?
No, that's something that I didn't even realize, that they're going to be a commission to actually certify. What are they going to do?
That's the proposal.
I mean, what are they going to do, walk down there and check it?
I mean, look, there's no doubt that proposals are in flux. But, you know, right out of the gate, these 8 senators came out very strongly. And as I understand it, there's an attempt to bring Republicans along, in large part because of the House of Representatives, which remains in Republican hands. I mean, you are now part of the minority party.
I think what most people do not realize, that there is a coalition of, let's say, growers and people, especially here in California,
Sure.
which we are the breadbasket of the world, who actually need workers. And so I think that I think they're part of that movement that wants to make sure that people can get some kind of guest card so that they can
Guest
work
worker
here.
program, long-term labor eligibility.
And don't you think that if a person had a guest card to work here, and perhaps, you know, that they could come and forth, that they wouldn't stay here illegally, that they might go home?
Arguably. I mean,
Yes.
there's no doubt that if the access was not thwarted, it could be that they're able to live cross-border. But in the final analysis, I mean, you weren't there, of course, but there were attempts to bring immigration reform in 2006. They failed. In 2007, they failed. In your mind, is 2013 different? I mean, do you really think there's
I think this bipartisan group is kind of a reflection of what maybe the entire, with few exceptions, the entire nation is going. I think most people will agree that there should be some fairness in this legalization, especially with the youngsters who, of their no volition of their own, came to this country with their parents, brought here. They didn't come, they were brought here.
What's also interesting, though, on this issue of bipartisanship on immigration, we know that the Republican Party took a beating vis-a-vis Latino voters in 2012. And so the view was that the Republican Party would need to, quote, wake up and see the sleeping giant that is the Latino electorate. At the same time, a lot of members of Congress from the Republican side do not represent districts with large Latino populations. They represent very conservative districts as a result of gerrymandering, as a result of new line drawing. So I just keep coming back to this notion that I mean, I don't know if you're going to be a leader on this issue. I know on the gun violence issue, you're part of a task force. But on the immigration issue, how do you, if that's your goal, cajole your colleagues on the Republican side to see that immigration reform is critical?
I think it's critical to the nation as a whole. Those of us that come from states where we have a large immigrant population really view the world differently than other people. Like you're talking about those people that have none. But I think even, let's say in Idaho, I know that there is a need for workers there when they do the potato harvest.
Sure.
I know at one time that they had to let the potatoes go fallow because there was nobody to harvest. So I think people understand that immigrants are doing the work that Americans are not going to do, don't want to do, will not do. So there has to be some realization that work still has to be done. You want to eat, I want to eat, everybody else wants to eat, so somebody has to do that work.
Her name is Gloria Negrete-McLeod. She's a member of the United States Congress. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Curt Hagman. He's a member of the California State Assembly about a unique immigration issue percolating in Chino Hills. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Curt Hagman, member of the California State Assembly, will be speaking about the budget, we'll be speaking about education, and also an immigration issue, one we wouldn't expect. But let's start with the budget, sir. As you know, the governor recently released his proposed budget. He says the budget is in balance. I never thought I'd say those words so soon after the recent debacles of Sacramento's fiscal crises, but what's your sense?
Well, the voters of California did give us a lot more money this year to balance the budget.
They did.
So, you know, as it stands right now, it's optimistic, like any other budget we always put. But it's the closest we've ever been. The 5 years I've been up in the state capitol. Remember, when I started with Swartzinger, we had a $42 billion deficit my first week up there. Could you
imagine?
Now, this is temporary, so we can't get used to these high amounts of the extra trough. We are the highest, one of the highest state taxes.
Well,
so now we
4
got
to 7 years, though. I mean, we got these properties.
So let's get it in balance, get our system back in order, and hopefully grow the economy the right way to get the extra income.
Now, there has been discussion about whether, because there have been so many drastic cuts over the last few years, we should start restoring some monies that were cut. The governor hasn't really looked at restoration in his proposed budget. What's your sense?
No, in fact, he's actually looking at more cuts, even like enterprise zones and other things. You know, on the fiscal side, we agree with the governor. Let's stay within our means. We have this much money. We got to spend this much money. We see a lot of my colleagues introducing more tax legislation this year, although they said they wouldn't. And what we like to see is more effort on getting our economy started. We're still, very high unemployment here in this state, and we think that has direct correlation to our income.
I need to ask you about that because I listened to the recent State of the State address. I also listened to Gavin Newsom, the Lieutenant Governor's introductory remarks, and both those individuals, Governor Brown, Lieutenant Governor Newsom, talked about regulation and talked about how we got to get a handle on regulation. These are Democrats talking about getting a handle on regulation. It would seem to me that as a Republican who's been talking about getting a handle on regulation, you should seize this moment.
We are trying to do everything we can. Like I said, we were very happy with the governor's budget, everything he said. Our job now is to make sure he holds true to it.
But on the regulation issue, I mean, honestly, Curt, this is one area that would seem to be ripe for bipartisan agreement. There was some CEQA reform last year on the margins. Democrats and Republicans seem to be really lock barrel behind regulatory reform.
We are. We're very close. Actually, the CEQA bill that almost came out last year, we were very pleased with. We know there's a task force on the Democrat side this time for bringing that up. We hope they're real reforms. We've seen political reforms in the past that don't do much, and we're very hopeful. We'll be right there with our Democrat colleagues to get reforms done this year.
Let me ask you, though, and this is more of an inside baseball question because I don't really know the answer. How much can really be done on the legislative side when so much of it is being done in departments?
Yeah, we've done that to ourselves. The legislative body gave a lot of the rules and rulemaking to bodies, the Coastal Commission, the Air Resource Board, and add to that 3,500 new laws each year.
Sure.
So it's not a quick fix. We got to unpeel the onion, so to speak,
and
try to be smart in how we get to get the process of business going here in California.
Let's talk about education. We know that over the last few years, tuition has increased at the CSUs and UCs dramatically, astronomically for some. But because Prop 30 passed, no help by the Republicans on that, but be that as it may, it did pass, there is money available. And so because of its passage, the Republicans in the legislature have proposed a pretty bold step as it relates to tuition.
We were told that, everyone saw the advertising, pass Prop 30 to save education, realizing that we already had an increase in budget that year, so we want to hold people to it. We introduced a bill that's going to freeze higher education tuition costs for the next 7 years while Prop 30 is in effect.
It's the life of Prop 30.
Correct.
Sir, it feels good. That bill feels really good, especially since my daughter, eldest, will probably wind up in college in about 7 years, so amen, hope it happens. But do we really want to put those handcuffs on the legislature, on the UC and CSU system? Because, lock boxes, Al Gore invented them allegedly, but do we want that type of restraint?
I do think we need to look at the other cost of education. We've talked in the past, we are a very high revenue state for our residents. We are very high in taxes and fees and such. So we need to focus on how to do our business of government much more efficient. We get more bang for our dollar. And we may never compete with most of the states, but we got to compete with ourselves to do a better job at it. As you know, I sit on a state allocation board. You know, there's a...
What does that mean?
A state allocation board. We give all the bond money to build new schools.
I see.
For K through 12. We have a school I built in LA County. You know, we matched the funds 50-50. That costs $600 million to build one school. There's things that we got to do better. So when we talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, it sounds like a gimmick, but we believe that's the case. So we're at very high levels of our highest we've been on tuition. By far, much faster than the cost of living increases or anything like that. Of course. If we freeze them at this high level, we should do a lot within those 7 years to get more people through our education system and cutting down the cost of the overhead of those universities.
But what if we do take a turn in 4 years, let's say? I mean, 4 years ago, we were in great shape. 2000, maybe 5 years ago, we were in great shape. What if we take a turn and we need to turn to the UC system and the CSU system, and we need more tuition?
Well, as a businessman, when my business goes ups and downs, we have to make strategic choices. Sometimes I cut staff, sometimes I cut pay. The state doesn't like, government doesn't like to cut a lot of things. We may freeze it, we may hold off on cost of tuitions. We don't like to cut and restream. I could tell you story after story about modernizing our system to go to computers, but then we don't put the software in because it takes away jobs. We defeat ourselves. We're not very efficient because we have no one to compete with. So I still believe we could do it. And if worse comes to worse, you know, 4 years, 5 years from now, the legislature could draw a new law that says we reverse the first one.
You could sunset.
But it's a goal versus having that annual fight that we're going to keep this a promise.
Have you spoken with your friends on the Democratic side about this legislation?
Yeah, a lot of them agree with the idea. I still don't know if we'll get out of committee.
Let's talk about an immigration issue in Chino Hills, your hometown. Who would have thunk we'd be talking about immigration in Chino Hills? But you recently went to a town hall meeting. You expected to talk about the state budget, and bam, some issue hit you out of nowhere.
And it's funny because, you know, you think you're very in touch with even your home city. Exactly. And the biggest controversy was maternity hotels.
What's a maternity? I mean, I've never heard that term. What's a maternity hotel?
A lot of newspapers lately, but what it is a lot of foreign countries, especially lately it's been China, the Pacific West, have been advertised and come to the United States to have your baby. So they
these anchor babies that we hear about?
Well, they're legal immigrants. They're getting visas to come here.
Oh, okay, so it's different.
They have a contract with a doctor or a hospital firm up here. They're paying for their whole medical care.
Right.
And these packages cost upwards to $30,000 to $50,000 to come out here for 2 months to have your baby.
Now, I know you're a state legislator, but I will ask you, is that legal on the federal side, if you know?
As far as I understand, I contacted my congressman and say, is this a problem? He goes, yeah, everywhere. It's a bigger problem than I even knew.
We know it's a problem, but is it
It's not illegal to come here while you're pregnant.
Right.
And so until there's basically immigration reform, but that's something the Congress wants to do. They're saying, hey, I get the best of both worlds. If I have my kid here, then they go back home.
Right, with the kid.
With their kid. And 18 years later, they're eligible for a lot of the tuitions and special things they don't get as
well, they're citizens.
Yes.
I mean, it's that simple. Because we have citizenship based upon birth.
And so this is legal immigration, having their babies here, versus the whole calm of illegal immigration, having kids here.
But here we have, you know, nice bedroom community, Chino Hills, a lot of concern. And at the town hall, you were asked, what can you do?
Exactly.
Sacramento, what can you do? Not much, but you do have an idea.
Yes, because, you know, the only thing we have is the state laws. You know, you can't stop at the border because we don't have that authority under immigration. That's the federal government purview. But what it is they're operating a business in a residential area.
Okay.
If these same people went to the Marriott, there's not a darn thing the state could do, because that's licensed to do business as a lodging. But if you do a lodging at your home, just like any other legal business, if you did a print shop in your basement or you started selling pies out of your garage, it's a code violation.
So is that a city issue or a state issue?
It's a city issue only, but what the state does is gives the cities powers to enforce and to collect on fines and fees. So what we're trying to do, it's a minor fine, it's an infraction even. You could do a misdemeanor, you could do infraction, or strictly civil to try to shut somebody down. We're bumping it up to say, look, we're going to make it, keep it at a fraction, but let's make the penalty more than $100. Let's make it up to $5,000 or up to $10,000 if you can figure out, because these people are paying. They had this one house 14 different mothers, and converted large home, converted all these different bedrooms as a maternity hotel.
You have to come back and tell us what happens on that issue. It is fascinating to think how dramatically world citizens want American citizenship.
Yeah, it shows the need for comprehensive immigration reform, too.
It does. His name is Curt Hagman. He is a member of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. He is back, Nathan Miller. He is a member of the Riverside Community College District. Sir, we congratulate you again on your election. How's it been? You've been in office for a couple months now. How's it feel?
I've really enjoyed it.
Sure.
You know, it's the other side of the business for me now. And, you know, we've got an incredibly supportive staff. The trustees that I work with, we're a very united bunch. I mean, obviously we have differing opinions from time to time, but I mean, it's really a great example of how a board of elected officials, I would argue, should work together.
Let me ask you, I was speaking with Mark Takano earlier, and he is now a member of the United States Congress. Right. He had been on the board of trustees at Riverside Community College District, and I said, who's your successor? He said, well, it's not that way anymore, because he ran at large. You ran in districts the first time it happened. So how is that changing the dynamic of the board?
I think it's definitely shifted kind of the ideal positioning of the board. What is it?
Meaning?
Is it more like a, well,
because you represent a geographic area.
Right, if you're talking about single member districts, it's begun to shift the dynamic of the board. Because I'm the first one. Mary Figueroa, who did win a single member district, is still of the district-wide mentality, and that doesn't completely go away. Obviously, you don't want to overshoot. You don't want to overlook the forest for the trees, so to speak. But you know, I'm elected to represent Corona, Norco, and Eastvale. I need to make sure that I pay close attention to the needs of the folks in that district.
Right.
Clearly, that surrounds the Norco Community College.
Of course.
But most of the needs of Norco are most likely going to be the needs of Riverside and the needs of Moreno Valley. But, you know, you can operate as independently as a supervisorial board where everybody respects the nature of the individual member's district, and, you know, everybody works together that way. It may eventually evolve into that. That will take shape after the next election cycle, when the other 3 trustees will be up for re-election, and whether or not they choose to run for re-election or not, or who wins.
We don't know yet. Yeah. I do want to ask you about funding. I have to think it's probably not a bad time to get elected for the first time to a community college district, because funding is a little better than it had been in the past.
Right.
As you know, Proposition 30 passed, and for better or for worse, it brings more money in to K-12, K-14, and higher education. So how is your community college district, as an example of others, handling this sudden influx of money that doesn't completely close the gaps the last few years? But
it's not an influx, and there's a lot of confusion.
Explain that.
The Riverside Community College District crafted its 2012-2013 budget based on Prop 30 passing. But this is essentially the case for everyone. The idea with Prop 30 is that it stops the bleeding. So there are no cuts, but there aren't any gains per se. That depends upon the revenue received, you know, that we'll start to learn about by May or June. Right. The governor came out with his budget proposal, and he said a lot of interesting things, right? Things that were very difficult for a lot of folks to follow. And it seems to me that he's the kind of guy that comes out and says, here's the budget, these are kind of the things I want to do. He does hope and glory, and, you know, we're on the road to recovery. A
lot of biblical references during his State of the State address.
Interesting references, historical references, and he's talking about things he'd like to see happen, and it's very theoretical.
And it has to make it through 120 members.
That's January, right? May you have a revise. So between January and May, all the stakeholders and all the staff and all the people that are responsible for putting the budget together has to follow off of that speech and go, okay, this isn't going to add up. For example, he said, he basically said that community colleges are going to receive about $350 million for adult education, right? And from what we understand, $650 million of it is going to stay with K through 12. He didn't say why. He didn't say that.
We have to talk about adult ed. I mean, that is a very significant development.
He didn't say that we're going to completely take over the role of adult education. He didn't say that we're going to share the role. He didn't say anything. I mean, the impression could be that $650 million goes to K through 12 because he's pleasing his his political army there, and they're going to have that extra money to kick around. And we get $350 million to do the job that they've been doing for $1 billion, only we do it at a third of the cost. That could be what it means. Maybe not. I don't know. But he may completely change those numbers around.
But this, to me, to my eyes, came out of nowhere. This notion that
everybody was perplexed by
on this one issue. It was but a small part of the budget, but yet that is what a lot of folks focused upon because it really would be a sea change. Traditionally, like you said, K-12 handled adult education, which is not community college education. It's kind of, is it GED, remedial type of education? Is that a fair?
Basic skills. GED,
but couldn't one argue
high school equivalency,
that maybe it is better placed at the community college district since
there could be an argument for that.
They are adults, and K-12 they are not adults.
But you know, to give us a third of what K-12 has been spending on it, and then expect us to do a same or equal job of providing adult education is a stretch. I mean, and it doesn't make sense too, because I know that in San Bernardino, they've recently expanded their adult education programs. They got funding to do it, so why would they all of a sudden do that and then put it squarely within the realm of community college?
So where do we go from here? It did cause a bit of an earthquake.
You wait for May. See what he says in May, and then
or do you, as a member of the district, try to lobby members in Sacramento to get that stripped from any language in?
Well, yeah, that process has already begun. Just this past week, and we had the Community College League of California conference, where every community college, well, most community college trustees and their chancellors were up there represented. And you know, Riverside Community College District went and spoke with each one of the representative legislators and let them know what's important to us, what isn't, and what's coming up.
Is there uniformity in the notion that the community colleges should not take over adult ed amongst the conference you described?
I think the position that we're at right now is that there's just confusion. You know, I don't think anybody wants to take it over for a third of the cost. Not when we're just trying to piece ourselves back together, and you know, we'll receive $1 million check this year, and I think we're looking at maybe 4 next year. But for
for adult ed?
No, for our community college district.
I see.
But that's after we've taken $60 million in cuts. And then he gives us $350 million, and we're supposed to add an entire adult education program to the mix for that cost. Nobody wants to do that.
Let me ask you about those cuts that you mentioned, because like you said,
I'm not a genius on the cuts.
Well, but I'm going to talk more thematically.
All right.
And thematically, I want to get a sense from you. Another thing that was said about the governor's budget is, yes, it appears to be in the black, and yes, he is taking a fiscally prudent approach, arguably, but there's no restoration of prior cuts.
There's no restoration of prior cuts. It's basically, it's plateaued. Right? And then there's been no attempt to address the deficit. No attempt whatsoever.
Allegedly there is no deficit. Are you talking about the debt? The outstanding debt?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed
the debt.
Yeah, the debt.
No. And that, I have heard that. I mean, I have heard that there are plenty of people who think there hasn't been enough attention focused on the debt. But I do want to go back to this issue of restoration. Do you believe that the governor, the legislature, should look at starting to restore some of these lost revenues? Because yes, there are no more cuts.
Well, how would you do that?
That's what I'm asking. I mean,
there are 2 options.
You go back into deficit.
Which
you can't do.
You can deficit spend, but you can. Well, maybe there's 3 options.
Right.
You can make cuts, and you can move
somewhere
money
else,
from one area to another. You can find other ways to stimulate revenue and charge new taxes and fees.
Right.
Cal Fire, right? They looked around.
That didn't go well.
We'll assess a fee to rural areas for fire prevention, and then it just turns out there was like $3.6 million that's hidden in some fund
like
that has revealed itself when they said all along they didn't have enough money.
What about tuition increases? Those happened in the last few years. They were huge.
Tuition increases are, right, community colleges are in an interesting position because community colleges' tuition increases are at the direction of Sacramento. Now, CSU and UCs, they can actually raise tuition on their own.
His name is Nathan Miller. He is a member of the Board of Trustees for the Riverside Community College District. I'm Brad Pomerance. We thank you for watching Charter California Edition.